What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains, a channel dedicated to talking about mental health through pop culture and introducing you to a couple cool flicks along the way. My name's Captain Nostalgia, and today we're going back in time. Let me take you back to a time where the horror genre has once again lost its way. The hype of Scream has come and gone, and now we are finding something to fill the void because found footage has not quite reached its peak yet, though the Blair Witch did tease us just a tad bit, and the rise of the remakes are coming, but something new is coming, and it'll earn the name torture porn in just a few years. And the rise of movies like Saw and Hostel, the French answer to those movies, sparked an entire brand new subgenre, which we now know as French extremist. And one of those just recently got a upgrade, facelift, if you will, and that is Calvaire. Also, I want to apologize before we get too deep into this video, because this video was supposed to come out a week ago, and I got sick, and I'm just getting over being sick now. So, apologies, but this movie is now playing in limited release, and it'll actually also be available. So if you guys have seen this movie or want to check it out after what I have to say, it will be available from Yellow Veil Pictures on digital beginning March 3rd. This movie tells the story of a traveling polka artist who is in between tour dates, and van breaks down and basically stays at this little inn, and, well, just never leaves. When it comes to this era of horror, I really love films like Saw and Hostel. I love me a good story, but I also love just kind of getting to see how creative the filmmakers can be. So I really like Saw. It's probably one of my top 5 favorite film franchises of all times. But it wasn't until probably maybe like 3 or 4 years ago that I really got into foreign films. So a lot of this era of horror, and especially of the torture porn subgenre, has flown under my radar, and so this was kind of my first foray into movies like this. I really want to watch High Tension. But here are my spoiler-free thoughts on this. Calvaire, it's an okay movie. I don't really think that this film kind of embodies the hype around or the brutality that history has kind of made this subgenre out to be. This movie, the pacing is very slow, and sometimes in that slowness, it definitely does feel like almost like a period piece drama. Maybe this is just me being a fan of other films that I've seen that are it's set in the same spirit of, at least narratively speaking, that this movie can sometimes feel predictable, and I really hate it that I would say something in my mind saying, I bet this character is going to do this, and then 10 minutes later, that came to fruition. And some films like that, it's just part of the genre. It's just in its DNA that you understand that things like this are going to happen, and sure enough, those exact things transpire. And I get it that there's nothing new under the sun, but I found it that with this film, because I've seen so many others like it, this movie just kind of blends into a large variety of those similar stories, and really does nothing to stand out. The acting is okay. I think Laurent Lucas, who plays the film's lead, Mark, he does a fine job. Like, it's okay. There's nothing really to write home about it in terms of his performance. Now, if we want to talk about the antagonist, who's played by Jackie Berroyer, I think he does an amazing job. Like, he absolutely steals the show 110% from me every frame that he's in. He's essentially a lonely hotel manager, and kind of when Mark shows up on his doorstep, he kind of gets reinvigorated to kind of be around people again, and you're kind of getting to kind of see and slowly just experience his unhinged nature, and I really liked that about his performance. What I think is really cool too is before the film ever reveals that he's the true antagonist, the way that certain shots are set up to like the lighting of his character are done really, really well. Use of shadows and how that it plays into the foreshadowing of his character arc, I thought was really well done. It's been a long time since I've seen anything quite like that, and I really found that to be refreshing. The pacing of this movie is fine, and this might just be my personal taste as a cinephile. Typically, if I'm watching a movie like this where the majority of the time is two characters interacting, kind of sharing their philosophies on life and other more philosophical topics, the performances and the dialogue have to really be elevated by the actors, and that's just not the case I felt like for this film. Of course, if you're a horror fan, you're probably coming to this video. Maybe you've heard whispers about this online and you're curious about what I thought about the horror aspect. I think that this works better as a drama than it does necessarily a horror film. The horror elements of this movie are, I don't want to say largely absent, but is a slow burn, and it definitely leans into the psychological aspect, which I thought was really well done. But when you start to get into some of the more brutal moments, they don't seem quite so brutal. And again, this just might be my experience with this movie, but there was one scene that I was kind of a little bit disgusted by the way that it's framed. Kind of got under my skin a little bit, but overall I just kind of felt like this movie really was, the last act of this movie, for as brutal as it tries to be, I found it boring. Let's run this through the Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 2.5 out of 5. I think this film has decent performances, especially from Berroyer. I really loved his performance in this. It really sent chills down my spine. He commands every frame of this film that he is in. And the horror aspect of it was okay, but overall this movie just, it felt really slow, and I just kind of really felt like I couldn't connect to the characters, and so it just kind of really made this movie really boring for me. And let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. When we meet Berroyer's character in this, he reveals that he is recently divorced from his wife. We also learn that she left him, and a part of his early character journey is how he holds on to her memory, essentially. And so I'm going to pull from two unlikely quotes from two unlikely sources that I never thought that I would be talking about in a context like this. But the first one comes from The Office, and Dwight Schrute saying that nostalgia is truly one of the great human weaknesses. And the second coming from a film which we reviewed last year, whose tagline was Nostalgia is Cancer. And that film in question happens to be called Eating Miss Campbell. I'll tag the review at the end of this movie. I highly recommend checking that out. We also interviewed the director last year, Liam Reagan. Great episode. Highly recommend it. You can learn about how his making that movie really helped him through a mental health crisis of his own, including a suicide of a friend. The reason I bring this up is because his character journey in particular showcases and is a cautionary tale of the dark side of nostalgia. Now, while I go by the nickname Captain Nostalgia, there have definitely been moments in my life where nostalgia has been a toxic trait, and actually, as I previously mentioned, can actually be cancerous. The idea to hold on to something, in this case being actually something really toxic, and while nostalgia can be something that we hold on to that gives us positive memories, it can also do the opposite as well, to where we hold on to something we interpreted as positive, but actually is toxic to our mental health. Such as the case for Berroyer's character in this movie. Is so much of what is motivating him is finding someone to take the place of his wife and actually brainwashing them into becoming his wife. And this movie's a wild ride in that respect, but you kind of have to understand that nostalgia can be a toxic thing. And it comes down to actually setting boundaries and actually understanding that just because something is good doesn't necessarily mean it's beneficial. Or if something is good in small doses doesn't necessarily mean that something in large quantities and large doses is going to be as beneficial. So understanding to set boundaries for yourself and saying, all right, this was a happy memory, but I'm going to let it consist that and not have to stay in this euphoric state, because in that euphoric state, the bubble, it can burst, it can pop, and actually can become deadly if we become fixated on it. Obsessions are really dangerous. So proceed with caution, and I think that Berroyer's character in this movie, Bartels, is a really cautionary tale of what unchecked nostalgia can look like and how it can manifest and how it can grow. As always, if you or someone you know is watching our videos and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please click the links in the show notes below. Check out our mental health resource library. Down there, you'll also find links to all of our social media, all of our podcasts, movie reviews like this, and links to our Patreon, and once again, most importantly, our links to our mental health resource library. Hit that subscribe button and check out Calvaire when it hits digital beginning March 3rd this week from Yellow Veil Pictures. Have a good night, guys.